You're young, pretty, have the soft androgynous vibe of a sad Pinterest elf, and you live in ancient Rome? Congratulations! Or actually, I'm so sorry. Because that means your life is about to turn into a BoJack Horseman episode dressed in a toga with a Game of Thrones Season 8 ending. High-budget tragedy, zero happy endings. Yeah, in Imperial Rome, being pretty wasn't just a social bonus. It was practically a curse, signed by Julius Caesar and stamped by the Senate. Feminine-looking men, delicate teenage boys, soft skin like a skincare commercial. They were all walking targets. Literally. And not for love. For power. For possession. For fetish. Think red, white, and royal blue, but make it dystopian, non-consensual, and with way more castration. Youthful male beauty became an imperial tool. An aesthetics machine before Tumblr, but with way more blood and togas. Because nothing says advanced civilization like turning boys into political sexual symbols while building aqueducts. Today, we're going to show you how Rome weaponized the body. How being beautiful was enough to lose your freedom, your identity, and sometimes actual pieces of your body. Yeah, Sporus, we're looking at you. Get ready. There will be drama. There will be performative grief. There will be a horror parade worthy of Final Destination, Toga Edition. And the worst part? All of it was totally legal. Picture this. The most emotionally unstable emperor in Roman history loses his wife. And instead of processing grief like a functional human, maybe try therapy? Cry into a pillow? Write mediocre poetry. He decides to fix it the Roman way. So what does he do? He finds a beautiful teenager, transforms him into a stand-in for his dead wife, and presents him to the empire as his new Empress. That's it. That's the plot. This young person was Sporus. And yes, the name itself already came with objectifying undertones. What followed was straight out of a tragic drama with Black Mirror vibes. Sporus was dressed, trained, and publicly paraded as the emperor's spouse. Nero, fully committed to his grief core aesthetic, used Sporus as a living memorial. And no one blinked. Because Rome. Now imagine being in his place, forced to perform a relationship, an identity, and a role you never asked for, all under the gaze of a ruling class that considered this artistic. In Imperial Rome, mourning was theater, and love could mean being cast in a production you couldn't leave. Think Evangelion, but instead of giant robots, it's a crumbling empire projecting its emotional damage onto a teenager. Sporus became a silent symbol of imperial grief and control, not by choice, but with the full blessing of the state. Okay, let's get one thing straight. In ancient Rome, being a good-looking boy was like walking around with a flashing neon sign that said, "Free real estate for imperial creeps." Soft skin. Youthful face. Delicate features. Congrats, you just got drafted into the worst OnlyFans subscription in history. And it came with chains. See, Roman elites had a thing for beauty, but not in a paint your muse kind of way. More like own the muse, break the muse, parade the muse in front of your enemies. Male youth was fetishized, especially if you were androgynous, submissive-looking, and preferably enslaved. You were decoration, a flex, a political accessory with legs. And the law. Oh, the law was chill as hell about it. Rome wasn't just complicit, it was actively vibing. There were no statutes protecting minors from sexual exploitation, especially if they were enslaved. In fact, beautiful boys were often sought out in the slave markets for their looks alone, destined to be singers, servers, or sex toys, depending on the buyer's vibe. It wasn't grooming. It was Tuesday. The imperial court basically ran on vibes, violence, and virginity. Your body could be auctioned like a collectible if it looked good under candlelight. You were expected to be quiet, pretty, and emotionally numb, like a background character in the Hunger Games, except with olive oil, not glitter. And if you think that's dystopian, just wait. We're not even at the psychological horror arc yet. So let's talk about grief. Not the healthy kind where you cry, process your emotions, maybe get into pottery. No. We're talking Nero grief. Imperial grief. The kind that skips therapy and goes straight to performance art, with wigs, makeup, and a traumatized teenager standing in for your dead wife. After Poppaea's death, Nero didn't just mourn, he redecorated his trauma. And poor Sporus? He became the centerpiece. The emperor didn't want closure. He wanted a Poppaea 2.0. So he turned Sporus into a living replica of his late wife, not just in appearance, but in public role. Ceremonies, appearances, formal greetings, all part of the imperial cosplay. This wasn't mourning. This was a man spiraling so hard, he created his own walking, breathing memorial. Imagine your ex recreating your entire vibe on someone else. Your clothes, your hairstyle, your mannerisms, and then dragging that person to brunch with mutual friends like, "See? I'm doing great." It's BoJack Horseman meets Black Mirror, but make it ancient Rome. A surreal blend of politics, performance, and personal collapse. Except Sporus couldn't leave the set. Because the set was the empire. And his life wasn't a role. It was a sentence. Rome turned grief into a public act, and Sporus was the unwilling actor. Nero wasn't just mourning. He was directing a one-man psychological opera starring someone who never auditioned. Hey Discovers, real quick before we dive back in, I've got a small favor to ask. If you love historical curiosities, epic battles, crazy mysteries, and mind-blowing stories that most people don't know about, then hit that subscribe button right now. That way, you won't miss any of our new videos and can keep uncovering insane facts every week. And of course, smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and brings you even more awesome content. Alright, let's jump back into history. If you thought Sporus's life hit rock bottom with Nero, oh honey, we're just getting to the sequel nobody asked for. Because Rome, like any good toxic franchise, couldn't stop at just one tragedy. After Nero's grand finale, read his death, Sporus didn't get freedom. He got passed around like a cursed artifact in a haunted museum. First came Otho, one of the chaotic contenders in Rome's, who wants to be emperor, bloodbath. Otho, who had also been romantically linked to Poppaea back in the day, because of course he was, took in Sporus like he was collecting emotional relics. Imagine your ex dies, and their new partner gets handed you like a consolation prize. That's Sporus's life now. A living flashback with good bone structure. But then, plot twist, Otho dies. Enter Vitellius, the next contestant on RuPaul's traumatized empire race. Vitellius didn't want to marry Sporus. He wanted to use him in a public spectacle. A reenactment of the myth of Proserpina, goddess of the underworld. And by reenactment, we mean forcing Sporus to act out his own death in front of a crowd. Yes, that was the plan. And Sporus? He said no the only way he could. He ended his own life before they could turn his trauma into one last show. Rome was like a dark fanfic where every chapter got worse, and no one hit delete. Each new emperor treated Sporus not as a person, but as an aesthetic tool, a symbol, a possession with no agency. Even his exit had to be on his terms, the first and only choice that was truly his. Okay, Sporus wasn't an isolated glitch in the Roman matrix. He was just the most documented example. Behind him, a whole shadow cast of beautiful young people who were chewed up by the empire's aesthetics machine and left behind without footnotes. Welcome to the blooper reel of Roman history. Except it's all horror, no comedy. Let's start with Elagabalus. This emperor makes Nero look subtle. He allegedly offered massive rewards to any surgeon who could transform him further. Because yes, gender nonconformity existed way before Tumblr got to it. He surrounded himself with lovers, eunuchs, and beautifully styled enslaved youths, treating his court like an opulent fever dream set in Sephora. Then we have the eunuchs. Castrated, often at a young age, selected for their voices or looks, and placed in positions close to power. As singers, servants, or status symbols. Their role: look good, stay quiet, don't age. And finally, the Nameless. The boys who were beautiful but not important enough to be remembered. The background decor of Roman elite life. The ones who vanished into mosaics and gossip, whose stories never made it past a senator's passing insult or a scribble in a love poem. Rome loved beauty the way a collector loves fragile art, to display, to own, but never to ask how it feels. These boys weren't lovers. They were accessories. And when their shine faded, the empire simply replaced them. This wasn't about love. It was about control. And beauty was just the leash. Let's strip away the marble and myths for a second. The Roman Empire wasn't just built on conquests and columns, it was built on bodies. Sculpted, silent, and strategically positioned. In Rome, beauty wasn't just admired. It was weaponized. Especially if it came with smooth skin, soft eyes, and no political power to say, stop. Youthful beauty, especially male, became a kind of imperial currency. It wasn't about affection. It was about optics. Want to show the world you're refined, divine, untouchable? Parade a delicate, pretty young companion at your side. Boom. Instant aesthetic dominance. The Imperial Instagram. Toga edition. Rome ran on vibes, but those vibes were legally enforced. The law didn't just allow the elite to possess beautiful bodies. It encouraged it through silence. No rules meant no boundaries. And when your empire thinks of people as art installations, that means someone has to be the pedestal. Usually a teenager. Usually without a voice. This was a system. A structure. Where the body was a political billboard and beauty was the branding. If you were young and pretty, you weren't seen as a person. You were an asset. A tool. A symbol of power that someone else got to use. So no, this isn't just a tragic love story from ancient times. It's the blueprint for how empires wrap control in gold leaf and call it culture. Rome didn't just conquer land. It conquered bodies. And it made sure they looked good while being conquered. So, what did we learn today, kids? That in ancient Rome, beauty wasn't a blessing. It was a liability with great cheekbones. If you were young, delicate, and didn't have a last name that screamed senatorial privilege, you were basically a walking target for power-hungry men with too much wine and not enough therapy. Sporus wasn't just a tragic footnote. He was the symbol of a system where aesthetics weren't just appreciated, they were appropriated. His life and death reveal how the empire took something as human as beauty and twisted it into a tool for domination, wrapped in silk, paraded in public, and protected by law. Because in Rome, it wasn't enough to look good. You had to belong to someone powerful. Otherwise, your body was just another statue to be claimed, posed, and discarded when the empire needed a new aesthetic. And guess what? That obsession with curated beauty, submissive charm, and weaponized appearances? It didn't die with the Caesars. It just changed outfits. From togas to filters. From amphitheaters to timelines. So next time someone says, you would have thrived in ancient Rome, ask them, with or without power? Because unless you had a legion behind you, your glow-up might have ended in a tragedy. Drop a comment if you think you'd survive being pretty in Rome. Spoiler: you probably wouldn't even make it to your first story post.